he went to the Mount of Olives. And while he was there, 4 disciples, James, John, Peter, and Andrew, looked at him, and in Luke 21, verse 7, they said, "Teacher, when will these things be? And what will be the sign when these things are about to take place?" On Sunday, we dealt with this, and the things that I pulled out were not just the signs, okay? We started looking at some of the things he was saying in his instructions to his disciples. And just to recap that, if you weren't here, or just as a reminder, because it's important if you were, Jesus said, first of all, not to be led astray. Not to be led astray. And that is important. Whether it is theological or doctrinal teaching in general, our study of the Word, or specifically when it comes to the end times, don't be led astray. He said that there would be people out there saying, look, he's already come, he's over here, or he's over there. Or some people even saying, I am Jesus. And not to believe them. Not to believe them at all. He went on to give other instructions, and he said to them that there would be persecution that would take place, and that when that happened, that it was their opportunity to bear witness, to give their testimony. And the third thing he said to them is that by enduring through this time, they would gain their lives. Now, as we move through the rest of this chapter, we see Jesus begin to actually give them more of the signs of the times. More signs. And, what are signs exactly? What do we mean by that? How many of you have ever driven Interstate 90 through South Dakota? Just curious, how many of you ever seen? Okay. Interstate 90 through South Dakota. I was 15 the first time I did it. I had gone on a vacation. My mom, my dad, myself traveled to Southern California where we met my uncle and his family. And from there, with my cousins, we traveled across the country, back to Kentucky, along the way visiting family. On the way home, though, we left my uncle, my aunt, and my 4 cousins and traveled back from Louisville, Kentucky, all the way back to Oregon in a car with just my parents and 15-year-old Tim. Not a fun trip in my category, okay? They didn't want to listen to the music I wanted to listen to. And so we were driving pretty bored. It was quiet in the car. And driving on Highway 90 or Interstate 90 through South Dakota, I started seeing signs. How many of you know what the signs are for? If you know, say it out loud. Yeah, Wall Drug. Wall Drug. Wall Drug. How many of you have ever been to Wall Drug? Okay. You go on I-90 and you get to a place and it's like, 90 miles to Wall Drug. And you'll drive like another few miles and it'll be like, 87 miles to Wall Drug. And you start seeing odd signs, and pretty soon it gets to be like every mile, every half a mile, every quarter mile, every few yards. There's signs for Wall Drug. And, we had no clue what it was. So we went. And it was like the craziest place on earth. I don't know how else to describe it. Years later, when our girls were really small and we went to Iowa and drove home, we went that way and we went to Wall Drug. And it was one of our favorite stops on that vacation with our family. Wall Drug was simply a place in the middle of nowhere where a drugstore owned by the Wall family started offering water to people, like in the late 1800s, early 1900s when they were driving through. It's close to the Badlands, okay? If you ever want to go to the Badlands, go to Mount Rushmore, go to Wall Drug. It's even better, in my opinion. And it was just amazing. Signs all over the place. And now when you go to Wall Drug, it's like a few blocks and all these weird random stores. It's a tourist trap, and it is amazing. Highly recommend going. But we started seeing the signs, and the signs were pointing to something. The signs are pointing to something. And so, like, when we understand that, you hear that talked about throughout the Bible. Jesus did signs. Those are miracles that he is doing that are pointing to something, namely that he's the Messiah. In fact, when Jesus came 2,000 years ago, the first time he came, there were multiple prophecies fulfilled. I'm not even sure exactly how many. It's funny when you go to study it, and if you want to find out, like, how many prophecies did Jesus fulfill the first time he came? It's all over the place. Low estimates are like 48. And it goes all the way up to 250, or even one theologian said 330. And I didn't have the time to read all of them. Just absolutely amazing. All of these different prophecies being fulfilled, signs that he is the Messiah, the anointed one promised by God. Now, with this, the disciples are asking him, like, hey, what are the signs of this destruction? You've said that you were going to leave. What are the signs that you're going to return? What are the signs that this destruction is going to happen, that the temple in Jerusalem is going to be demolished? And in their minds, they also know that there are ancient prophecies that are against the enemies of Israel. When are the signs going to happen that that's going to take place as well? They're asking all these questions. And as we get deeper into studying this tonight, it's one of those things that the signs aren't linear as we read through this section. I'm just trying to kind of give us a little bit of a gameplay as we're going through here. A lot of times when we read the Bible and we read prophetic sections, we tend to think everything is in a linear fashion when it comes to time, okay? Central Oregon. I love Central Oregon. In fact, can I recommend, if you're going to take a family vacation this summer, not only go to Wall Drug, but go to Central Oregon. And I don't know how you're going to work that out, but you can do it. The thing I love about Central Oregon is the mountains. When I lived in Central Oregon and I worked construction, I used to love on my breaks, on my lunches, to go and just be able to eat my food and look at the mountains. So beautiful. When we lived there, I knew all the names from big to small, going from south to north along the Cascades. If you're ever in Bend and you go up to Pilot Butte on a clear day, it's amazing, all the mountains you can see. It's interesting, though, because if you travel south of Bend and you start getting past Lapine and you look back at the mountain ranges, suddenly the order of the mountains changes. Kind of weird, huh? It changes. They're suddenly not in the same order. And it's because as you look at the mountains straight on, it looks like they're all lined up. But the more you start to move and see them from south to north, you realize that they're not all in a straight line. There's jaggedness and there's spaces in between them. From one angle, it looks one way. From another angle, it looks another way. Now, the prophets throughout the Bible, as they write prophecy, they're looking and it's like they're seeing a mountain. And they write down what they see from the lowest valley going up a mountain. But once you start traveling it, you realize there's spaces, and it's not one mountain. It's several mountains with valleys in between. When I was in high school, I went hiking on Mount Hood on a men's ministry event for our church. And my brother, myself, and my best friend saw this one hill. And we were like, wow, I bet it is an amazing view from the top of that hill. And our guide up on this trip said, hey, why don't you guys go ahead and run up there and tell us later what that view looks like. He did it as a prank on us because he knew it wasn't a hill. As we ran to the top of this thing, we realized, one, it was a lot further than it looked, right? And two, It was an incline with a plateau, with an incline with a little bit of a dip in a valley, and up another really steep incline. That's how prophecy works in Scripture. And one of the best verses that describes that is Revelation chapter 1, verse 19. In order to understand prophecy, and it's basically right at the beginning of Revelation, Jesus tells us how to read Revelation. He says to John, write down, therefore, the things that you have seen, those that are, the things you have seen, those that are to take place after this. And basically what you get with Revelation is the things that have happened in the past, the things that are about to happen, and the things that are going to happen way in the future. Now, I feel like I'm probably making you drink from a fire hose at the moment. How many of you would agree with that? All right, all two of you. Great. We're doing good. So I'm just trying to give us that idea, because when we read through this section of Luke chapter 21, what's happening is Jesus is prophesying, but it's not all happening at one time, okay? We're going to look at things that are going to take place in the very near future to Jesus, things that are going to take place in our future and probably closer than we realize, and things that apply to us right now, today. So, Luke 21, verse 20, Jesus says this: when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you know its desolation has come near. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those who are inside the city depart, and let not those who are out in the country enter it. For these are the days of vengeance, to fulfill all that is written. Alas, for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days. For there will be great distress upon the earth, and wrath against this people. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Now, when did this take place? About 40 years after Jesus prophesied it. This is prophecy happening roughly, we'll just give a round about around 30 AD. In 70 AD, this was fulfilled. And Jesus prophesied it that because the people of Israel, the chief priests, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, all the powerful, did not recognize him, that the time of peace would be taken from them. What happened is that the Roman armies surrounded Jerusalem. They laid siege to it, and people had a choice as this was starting to happen. They could either flee and run away, but that's not what most people did. Most people thought, hey, the safety is in Jerusalem. We'll be behind the walls, and the enemy can't get us. But what the Romans did is they surrounded it, laid siege, and according to Josephus, a Jewish man who was a historian, he was by nationality Jewish, but very Roman in culture. He talks about the siege that took place. It got so bad that there was no food. They started eating things that even the animals wouldn't eat. They were selling dried up grass. A bundle of dried up grass was selling for 4 drachmas. They were eating leather, like boiling leather and eating it, even taking the leather off of their shields so that they wouldn't be able to fight with it and trying to eat that. Josephus records the story of one lady. She lived outside of Jerusalem, And I can't remember what trade she was in, but she was a very, very wealthy Jewish woman. When the siege took place, she took all of her wealth, all of her food stores, all of her servants, all of her guards, and she went into the city. Now, over the siege, there were zealots, Jewish zealots, that started going around basically like gangs. And Josephus said up to 3 times an hour, they would go through people's houses. They would even search people to try to find any food that was being hidden by them. Over the weeks and months, with this lady who was very wealthy, they raided her food stores time and time and time again until she had nothing. And it got to the place where finally, in a statement that she made to people, that it would be better off for her infant if she killed the infant than let it just starve to death, so that she could eat the infant and live. And she ate half of her child and tried to give the other half to the zealots, to which they were horrified when they discovered this. She even said to them, "What? You men won't do what a woman will do?" And news of that spread throughout Jerusalem at the time, and eventually even to the Romans. That is how bad this siege got. Jesus told them this is exactly what would take place, and it did. By the time the Roman armies broke through the walls, the Roman generals completely lost control of the armies, and they lit everything on fire. With the temple courts, there was not only the stones of marble that were shining white, but there was gold all over the place, on the roofs, on sconces. And as the fires heated up, the gold started melting, and it got into all of the cracks between the stones in the temple area. So the Roman soldiers began taking the stones apart in order to get to all of the gold that was in all the cracks of the stones. And eventually, it was completely leveled and laid waste, exactly as Jesus had prophesied. Now, I've said on Sunday, and just to reiterate tonight, Luke 21 has 2 sister passages, both in Mark chapter 13 and Matthew 24 and 25. They tell almost the same exact things, although this section that we just read in Luke is only found in Luke. It's not talked about in the other 2 Gospels that have this discourse that is expressed. So that took place 2,000 years ago, and it ushered in the time of the Gentiles, which is basically the time that we are in right now. Some of you have heard me say that when we're done with Luke, we will be either right after Luke starting Daniel, or we might do one small book of the Bible and then go to the book of Daniel. We will talk about that in detail much more when we study the book of Daniel, because all of this is prophesied in some amazing ways as well with Daniel's prophecies. But that's the part that took place in the past. As we move on to the next section, Jesus now is prophesying something that hasn't taken place yet. It's coming in the future. He says this in verse 25. There will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distress of nations in perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves. People fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Isn't that incredible? Before the return of Christ, there's going to be things that are taking place all across the world. He talks about this with signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. What does that mean exactly? We know that at the time of the fall of Jerusalem, there weren't these cataclysmic things that were taking place, but they are talked about in a couple different parts of Revelation. Let me read part of Revelation chapter 6, starting at verse 12 to you. Maybe just a little bit of context. Let me actually start at verse 1, and then we'll drop down. Revelation 6, verse 1. Now I watched when the Lamb, Jesus Christ, opened one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. This is a white rider on, a rider on a white horse. And as we learn, this is not the Messiah. This is the Antichrist who's coming. And as we read through this chapter, if we read through the whole thing, we'd end up with the four horsemen of apocalypse coming. Very significant. Wars, pestilence, death, famine, all coming on the earth. When we get to verse 12, Jesus opens up the sixth seal, and we read this. When he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that has been rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?" We read about another instance similar to that a little bit further in Revelation that I'm not going to go into right now just for time's sake, but talking about literally how when Satan made war against Christ, against his people, how there were signs in the stars, in the sun, and in the moon that were taking place. Jesus says these are the signs that are going to take place before the return of Jesus Christ. And, we're hearing about this, the other things he talked about. There would be wars, there would be rumors of wars, there would be famine, there would be pestilence. The book of Revelation talks about how much it will cost to buy food. Incredible inflation will be taking place so that most people won't even be able to afford food. All of these different things that will be happening before the time that Jesus returns. Now, for the last 2,000 years, have there been wars? Oh, yeah. Rumors of wars? Oh, yeah. Anyone watch the news lately? Right? Rumors of wars constantly. Are there famines? Oh, yeah. There's always famines taking place across the earth. Natural disasters? Absolutely. Now, here's the thing. Are they increasing? Possibly. Possibly. One of the things that people have tried studying this It feels and it seems like they're increasing, but we're not sure actually. Is it that they are increasing in frequency and number? Or is it that for the first time in the history of mankind, we are able to see what is going around the face of the earth right now, instantly, so that we're just more aware of things taking place all throughout the world? Which one is it? Yes. We're really not sure. And depending on what experts you read, you hear different things. The frequency, it could just mean that we will become more aware of all of these things taking place. But I think it's actually both at the same time. We're going to become more aware, but there is going to be an increase in these kinds of things. And when Christ returns, these are the signs. Verse 29, Jesus goes on and he tells this. He told them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they come into leaf, you see for yourselves and know that the summer is already near. So also when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all has taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Jesus, in this example, talks about the fig tree. You can look at it. I was rejoicing this last weekend because we hit February. And I was like, thank you, January's over. January is my least favorite month of the year, right? My least favorite month. My second least favorite month, February. February. And I rejoice when February is over. Because when February is over, we are almost to daylight savings times, and we are almost to the spring equinox, right? I like it when we get the really long days around here. And for me, when we hit January 1st, I'm like, all right, I'm just looking forward to long days now. I'm looking forward. And you can tell, not just from a calendar, that we're getting closer and closer and closer. I'm already seeing our daffodils trying to pop up. I think they're slightly confused. But, you're starting to see these little things, and on some of our trees, little buds here and there. You can tell the times and when spring is coming simply by opening your eyes and looking up, right? And Jesus is saying, that's exactly what will happen. You can tell when the time of my return is getting closer. It's getting closer. It's getting closer. Now, we won't go into all of it tonight. Again, we just don't have time. But you heard me say a few times, I think we're really close. In fact, can I just tell you something? I absolutely know 100% we are closer today than we were yesterday. All right? But, realistically, look at it this way. The biggest thing that has happened that tells us that we are getting very close is when you look at Israel. When you look at Israel. I have discussions with my pastor friends a lot about eschatology, the study of this stuff. And most of my friends, we all agree that Jesus is coming back, but we disagree on how it's all going to take place. In fact, I sat in here yesterday for an hour and a half with a good friend of mine, another pastor, and we went through a theological essay together with highlighters and debating this kind of stuff. Man, it was just loads of fun. But, it was great. We disagree about a lot of it. But the one thing none of them can answer is, what do you do with the nation of Israel? What do you do with the nation of Israel? Because the nation of Israel was not in existence for roughly 2,000 years, but the Bible said prophetically over and over and over again that Israel is the key to answering all of the prophecies about the second coming of Jesus Christ. For almost 2,000 years, pastors and theologians had to come up with alternate interpretations of Scripture because they would look at it and be like, well, this passage can't mean what it says because it's talking about Israel, but there is no Israel. So it must just be talking about the church. And there's all kinds of theologies today that people are still taught. All the blessings that are talked about in the Bible for the nation of Israel, well, they're actually for the church. And why did those come about? Simple. There wasn't an Israel, so it didn't make sense. Oddly enough, all of the people who teach that kind of theology, you see it most in Reformed theology, somehow apply all of Israel's blessings to the church, but all of Israel's curses still go to Israel. I don't know how that is fair, right? Yeah, amazing. But people don't know what to do with it. They don't know what to do. Israel became a nation again. There is only one nation on the face of the earth historically that was ever destroyed completely, dispersed completely, and then brought back to become a nation again. And you know what's amazing? It didn't happen once. God did it twice. He did it twice. And that's the biggest sign that we see. I wish I had more time to go into more signs. If I did, I would take us through a study tonight, starting with Daniel. And we would study all of Daniel. And from there, we'd go to Zechariah and study all of Zechariah. And from there, we'd go to some really big portions of both Psalms. We'd look at portions of Isaiah. And then finally, we'd do a thorough study through Revelation. And maybe on the way, stop in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, everything from Acts all the way to all the epistles, right? Because all of them prophetically talk about this. Everything points to this. The signs are all around us. Let's close it out with the final verses of this passage. And Jesus basically in these last few verses is going to talk about some stuff that apply to us right now, tonight. He says this in verse 34. Watch yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and cares of this life, and that the day come upon you suddenly like a trap. For it will come upon all who dwell on the face of the whole earth. But stay awake at all times, praying that you may have the strength to escape all these things that are going to take place and to stand before the Son of Man. So there, he's telling us stuff that applies to us right here tonight. Watch yourselves. Don't let our hearts drift away into just drunkenness and the cares of this world. Otherwise, that day of his return will be sprung on us like a trap. I only did that because I just woke somebody up. Verse 36, stay awake. He says it another way. Just praying that we're going to have the strength on that day. Goes on, verse 37. And every day he was teaching in the temple, but at night he went out and lodged on the mount called Olivet. And early in the morning, all the people came to him in the temple to hear him. How do we stay awake? Pray, and we follow what these people did. Get into the presence of Jesus Christ every single day. And you won't be caught unaware. You will not be caught unaware. Every day, get in your word. Read the Bible. Listen to it. Hear a good sermon. I can recommend a few people. Every day, worship him. Turn off the radio and start singing songs of praise on your drive home. Check it out. If you are driving by yourself on your commute in your car, you don't have the excuse of, well, I'm a bad singer. I don't want to offend anybody. Because it's only you, right? Unless you offend yourself. And if that's the case, let's talk. Pray. 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 Because on the day he returns, our salvation is at hand. Pretty incredible when you look at all of these things taking place. It says that Jesus Christ would come in the clouds. Jesus told his disciples in Acts chapter 1 that they were to remain in Jerusalem and he would send the Holy Spirit to them. And from there, they would be his witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And while he was talking, what happened? He was caught up in the air, in the clouds. And while they're all watching, like, wow, that's cool. Like, he just floated up in the clouds. An angel appeared to them and reminded them of what they had been told to do. To wait, to be filled with the Holy Spirit, and to go out and be witnesses. And he would return the same exact way. That day is getting close. One final sign. Jesus in Matthew 24 said that this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. It's interesting. When you study the spread of the gospel for the last 2,000 years, it has moved in different directions, but primarily, if you look at it, it's moved one main direction. Anyone know? From east to west. From east to west. And you saw it start to spread over different continents. And it's rough, but here's the amazing thing. It has now almost wrapped itself all the way around the globe, the spread of the gospel. So that today, when I was in Bible college, we talked about the 1040 window in missions, a section of the world that just did not have the gospel of Jesus Christ, and Christians were persecuted. And what you find today is all through those countries, the gospel is going out in incredible ways. Some of you have heard me say this, like in Iran. In Iran, of all places today, revival is taking place. And literally, people are having dreams and visions of the man in white. It's Jesus appearing to people. And people are getting connected to missionaries underground that way. And literally, the nation of Iran, revival is happening underground, just like it happened in China before. Absolutely amazing. The gospel is almost spread throughout the entire globe. And when that happens, he returns.